You don't ask for what you need. You wait for people to notice. And when they don't, you tell yourself it's fine, that you didn't really need it anyway. But you did. You just learned that needing something out loud came with a price. You learned early that love wasn't automatic. It had to be earned. It had conditions, rules that were never written down, but you felt them anyway. Be good and you'll be loved. Be quiet and you'll be safe. Be helpful and you'll be kept. So you became all of those things, not because you wanted to, because you had to. Love wasn't something you could count on. It showed up when you performed well, when you made someone proud, when you didn't cause problems, when you got good grades or stayed out of the way or made them look good in front of other people. And when you didn't, the love disappeared. Not loudly, not with an explanation. It just went cold. A parent who stopped talking to you, who got distant, who punished you with silence. Or maybe it was the opposite. Maybe love came with anger, with yelling, with reminders of everything you did wrong, with comparisons to other kids who had it together. Either way, you learned the same thing. That love wasn't yours to keep. It was something you had to work for, every single day. So you started monitoring yourself. You learned to read the room before you entered it. You checked their mood before you spoke. You adjusted your personality depending on who was in front of you. You became a different version of yourself for every person. The version that wouldn't upset them. The version that wouldn't disappoint them. The version that wouldn't be too much. And it worked. You stayed safe. You stayed loved. Or at least, you stayed close to something that looked like love. But it wasn't love. It was approval. And approval is conditional. It's based on performance, on meeting expectations, on being what someone else needs you to be. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't require you to hide parts of yourself. It doesn't punish you for having needs. But you didn't get that. So you didn't learn that. You learned the opposite, that your value was tied to your usefulness, that your worth was based on how little trouble you caused, that being loved meant being convenient. And now you're an adult, and no one's telling you this anymore. But you still believe it. You still live like love is something you have to earn. You still perform. You still monitor. You still shapeshift depending on who's watching. You don't ask for help because asking feels like admitting you're not capable. And not being capable means you're a burden. And being a burden means people will leave. So you carry everything alone. You handle your problems quietly. You don't tell people when you're struggling. You say, "I'm fine," when you're not. Not because you're lying, because you genuinely believe that your pain isn't worth someone else's time. You don't trust compliments. When someone says something nice about you, you deflect it. You downplay it. You find a way to give credit to someone else. Because praise always came with a catch. It was never just given freely. It was either followed by criticism or it was used as leverage later. So now when someone compliments you, you're waiting for the other part. The part where they tell you what you still need to fix. The part where they remind you not to get too comfortable. And when that part doesn't come, you don't feel relieved. You feel suspicious, like they just haven't seen the real you yet. You over-apologize. You say sorry for things that don't need an apology, for taking up space, for having an opinion, for needing something, for existing in a way that might inconvenience someone. You apologize before you ask a question, before you share how you feel, before you say no, because no wasn't really an option growing up. Saying no meant you were ungrateful, selfish, difficult. So you learned to say yes, even when everything in you wanted to say no. Even when saying yes meant ignoring your own boundaries, your own comfort, your own needs. And now you're an adult and you still do it. You say yes to plans you don't want to make, to people you don't want to see, to requests that drain you, not because you're generous, because you're afraid that saying no will make people stop loving you. And maybe they will. Maybe some people only stay because you're easy, because you don't push back, because you give them what they want without making them work for it. But those aren't your people. Those are people who benefit from your conditioning, and you keep them close because they feel familiar, because they repeat the same dynamic you grew up in. where your job was to make someone else comfortable, where your role was to be low maintenance, where your worth was determined by how little you asked for. You don't know how to receive love. When someone loves you without asking for anything in return, it feels wrong. It feels too easy, like there's something you're supposed to be doing, some way you're supposed to be earning it. So you start performing anyway. You do things they didn't ask you to do. You anticipate their needs. You try to stay one step ahead, not because they expect it, because you expect it of yourself, because you don't know how to just be loved. You only know how to work for it. And when they tell you to stop, when they say you don't have to do all that, you don't believe them. You think they're being nice, that eventually they'll get tired of you, that eventually they'll realize you're not worth the effort. So you keep working, you keep proving, you keep trying to be indispensable, because if you're useful enough, maybe they'll stay. You struggle with people who are consistent, people who don't play games, who say what they mean, who show up the same way every time. It feels boring. It feels flat, because your nervous system was trained in chaos, in unpredictability, in having to guess what someone needed from you. So when someone is just steady, you don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to read them. You don't know what they want. And that feels more dangerous than someone who's all over the place. Because at least with chaos, you know your role. You know you're supposed to fix it, to manage it, to calm it down. But with stability, there's nothing to fix. And if there's nothing to fix, what are you for? So you create problems, not consciously, not on purpose, but you test them. You push to see if they'll leave. You wait for them to prove that love is conditional, because that's what you know. And when they don't leave, you don't feel safe. You feel confused, like you're waiting for the punishment that never comes. You don't celebrate yourself. You don't acknowledge your wins. You move past them like they don't matter, because nothing you did was ever enough. There was always something else, always another expectation, always a higher standard. So now when you accomplish something, you don't let yourself feel proud. You immediately look for what's next, what you still need to improve, what you could have done better, and you never stop. You never rest, because resting feels like falling behind, and falling behind means losing value, and losing value means losing love. You're exhausted, not just physically, emotionally. You're tired of performing, tired of monitoring, tired of trying to be perfect, but you don't know how to stop, because stopping feels like giving up, and giving up feels like proving that you were never good enough in the first place. So you keep going, you keep pushing, you keep earning, even though no one's asking you to anymore, even though the people in your life now aren't the people who taught you this. Your nervous system doesn't know that. It's still running the same program, still scanning for conditions, still waiting for love to be taken away, still preparing to earn it back. And it's not your fault. You're not broken. You're not damaged. You adapted. You survived. You did what you had to do to stay close to the people you needed. And it worked. You made it. But what worked then doesn't work now. The strategies that kept you safe are now keeping you small. The skills that earned you love are now preventing you from receiving it. Because real love doesn't have conditions. It doesn't require you to be perfect. It doesn't punish you for having needs. It doesn't disappear when you make a mistake, but you don't trust that yet, and you won't until you start noticing the pattern. Noticing when you're people-pleasing, when you're over-functioning, when you're saying yes and your body's saying no, when you're taking responsibility for someone else's mood, when you're performing instead of just being. That's where it starts. Not with fixing, not with becoming a different person, just with seeing that you're still trying to earn something you were always supposed to have, and you don't have to anymore. You're allowed to need things. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to stop performing. You're allowed to just exist and be loved anyway. If this felt familiar, stay here. Not because there's something wrong with you, but because recognition is the first step. You can't change what you don't see, and now you're starting to see it.